What if I told you that driving a sports car could actually cost you less than that sensible sedan sitting in your driveway right now? Yeah, I know how that sounds. You're probably thinking I've completely lost touch with reality. But before you click away, let me ask you something. Have you ever actually calculated what your practical, boring, responsible car is really costing you? Because I did the math, and what I found is going to flip everything you thought you knew about smart car buying completely upside down. See, we've all heard the same advice our entire lives. Buy reliable. Buy boring. Stick with the brands your parents trust. Whatever you do, stay far away from anything with a luxury badge because those things are money pits, right? Well, what if that conventional wisdom is actually costing you a fortune? What if there's a completely different way to look at this that nobody's talking about? Let me break down something that's going to sound wild at first. There are exactly 2 sports cars on the market that can legitimately save you money compared to regular vehicles. And when I say save money, I'm not talking about some theoretical scenario or creative accounting tricks. I mean actual real dollars that stay in your pocket instead of evaporating into thin air. Sounds impossible? Stay with me, because the data behind this is absolutely wild. Here's what most people get wrong from the start. When you're thinking about how much a car costs, what pops into your head? Probably the monthly payment, right? Maybe gas prices if you're driving a lot? Insurance comes up pretty quick, too. And sure, those matter. But there's this massive expense that silently drains your wallet every single day, and you never even see a bill for it. I'm talking about depreciation, which is just a fancy word for how much value your car loses while you own it. The American Automobile Association tracks this stuff obsessively. Every single year, they crunch the numbers on what it actually costs to own a vehicle in this country. They look at everything. Insurance premiums, fuel costs, maintenance bills, registration fees, the whole 9 yards. And their latest findings? The typical American is dropping nearly $12,000 annually just to keep a car. That's over $1,000 every month before you've driven a single mile for fun. But here's the part that should make your jaw drop. Out of that entire amount, almost 40% is pure depreciation. We're talking about more than $4,000 a year that just vanishes because your car is worth less today than it was yesterday. Think about that for a second. Your vehicle is losing more value just sitting there than you're probably spending to actually fuel it up and drive it around. That's the invisible wealth destroyer that nobody wants to talk about at family gatherings. Now, most vehicles follow this really predictable pattern, right? You buy something fresh off the lot, and the moment that paperwork is signed, boom, value drops instantly. Then every year you hold on to it, the number keeps sliding down. Fast forward 5 years, and you're lucky if that car is worth even half of what you originally paid for it. Some luxury brands? Even worse. They crater faster than a meteorite hitting Earth. But this is where things get absolutely fascinating. There's this research firm that decided to dig into real transaction data. Not predictions, not estimates, but actual sales where real people handed over real money for used vehicles. They analyzed hundreds of thousands of deals over the past year to figure out which 5-year-old cars held their value the strongest. And what they discovered should make anyone who bought a practical family sedan seriously reconsider their life choices. 2 models absolutely dominated the entire market. The iconic 911 and its little sibling, the 718, from that German manufacturer everyone associates with expensive taste. These weren't just winning against other performance vehicles. They were crushing everything, period. The 911 only lost about 17% of its value after 5 years. The 718, around 22%. Meanwhile, competitors from Munich were hemorrhaging over half their value in that exact same time frame. Let's put some actual numbers to this because it's one thing to talk percentages, it's another to see the cash. Imagine you drop $100,000 on a vehicle. Losing 17% means you're down $17,000 when you sell it half a decade later. But losing 50%? That's $50,000 gone. You're looking at a $33,000 difference right there before we even start talking about anything else. That gap is massive. Now, I already hear the objections forming in your head. Sure, but those cars cost way more to begin with. Fair point. We're definitely talking about 6-figure purchase prices here, depending on how you option things out. But that's exactly why we need to think in percentages instead of just staring at sticker prices. Because when you actually sit down and do the real math, something pretty remarkable starts to happen. That enormous advantage in holding value begins to completely overwhelm every other expense you can imagine. Let me walk you through this step by step. Insurance is always the first thing people throw at you when you mention owning something exotic. And yeah, the numbers are higher. Recent data shows that full coverage for a 911 runs about $5,300 a year. The national average for all vehicles, around $2,700. So yes, you're paying roughly double. That's an extra $2,700 annually, which over 5 years adds up to around $13,500 in additional insurance costs. But remember that $33,000 depreciation advantage we just calculated? Even after you subtract that extra insurance money, you're still almost 20 grand ahead. And that's using average numbers. Depending on where you live, your age, your driving history, your actual insurance might be way less than those averages. The point is, depreciation is such a monster that it can completely dwarf all these other costs everyone obsesses over. What about fuel? That's the other big one people love to bring up. Sure, these cars aren't exactly sipping gas like a hybrid. The latest 911 gets about 21 miles per gallon combined. Not terrible, not amazing. But here's something really interesting that most people don't consider. The typical owner of one of these cars drives roughly 4,000 miles per year. That's less than a third of what average Americans put on their vehicles annually. Think about why that is for a second. Most people buying these cars aren't using them to commute 50 miles each way through traffic every day. These are weekend warriors, Sunday morning drives through scenic routes, the occasional road trip. A lot of owners have another vehicle for the boring daily stuff. So even at $4 per gallon for premium fuel, if you're putting 5,000 miles on it annually at 21 miles per gallon, you're spending less than $1,000 a year on gas. Some people spend more than that on coffee runs. And if you're in that stage of life where you're not commuting as much anymore, maybe working from home several days a week, or you've got flexibility in your schedule, suddenly that performance car isn't racking up massive mileage like your old family hauler used to. Now let's tackle maintenance, because this is where people really assume these cars will financially destroy them. And look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Parts and labor aren't economy car cheap. But the actual service schedule isn't insane. Oil changes once yearly or every 10,000 miles. Brake fluid every couple years. Major services spread out over longer intervals. When you actually total everything up, estimates for 5-year maintenance on something like a 718 come in around $8,700, plus maybe a few thousand for unexpected repairs if something goes wrong. That's not pocket change, but it's also not the financial apocalypse some people imagine. And here's what helps explain why these vehicles hold value so ridiculously well. They're actually quite reliable. There's this big survey every year where they ask owners of 3-year-old cars about problems they've experienced. This particular German brand consistently ranks near the top among luxury manufacturers. In recent years, they've placed second and third, which is better than a lot of other premium European brands people assume are bulletproof. Fewer problems means happier owners. Happier owners means more people want to buy them used. More demand means higher prices in the secondary market. It creates this positive cycle that keeps feeding itself. There's also brand loyalty data showing that people who own one of these cars overwhelmingly come back and buy another one. When customers love the experience enough to become repeat buyers, that tells you something real about the ownership experience, and it keeps demand strong in the used market. Once people experience it, they often don't want to go back to anything else. But here's where you need to pay very close attention, because not every model from this manufacturer saves you money. This is absolutely critical. Those two models I mentioned earlier, the 911 and the 718, are the depreciation champions. Other models from the same brand are just okay or even mediocre by comparison. Take their smaller SUV. Over 5 years, it loses about 44% of its value. That's better than the luxury compact SUV average of 53%, so it beats the competition. But it's nowhere near 911 territory. On a $70,000 purchase, that advantage translates to maybe $6,500 less depreciation than average. Real money, sure, but not the massive financial advantage you get with the sports cars. Their larger SUV loses about 50% over 5 years, which is basically average for big luxury SUVs. Excellent vehicle if you need the space and capability, but you're not saving money on depreciation. And their electric car? Projections show it'll retain only about 39% of its value after 5 years. That's actually better than the average EV, but it's still losing 61%. Incredible car to drive, but you're not buying it to save money. Why do electric vehicles depreciate so fast right now? Several reasons. Battery technology keeps improving rapidly, making older EVs feel outdated faster than gas cars. People worry about battery life and expensive replacement costs. Charging infrastructure is still evolving. The whole EV market is in flux. So if you want this save money strategy to actually work, you need to be specific. You're targeting that iconic coupe first, the mid-engine sports car second. The convertible version is still decent, but depreciates slightly more than the hardtop. Now, there's something important you need to understand about all this data. When researchers analyzed those hundreds of thousands of car sales, they were looking at vehicles from 2019 and 2020 model years that sold recently. Those cars lived through the pandemic used car market when prices went absolutely bonkers because of supply chain issues and shortages. That created unusually strong resale values for a lot of vehicles, especially enthusiast cars. Meanwhile, future projections for brand new 2025 models suggest they'll retain about 54% of their value by 2030, meaning roughly 46% depreciation. That's still good enough to be in the top 10 cars in America for resale value, but it's way more conservative than that 17% observed number. The difference is that those projections assume a normalized market where inventory is back to normal and prices aren't inflated by shortages anymore. Both pieces of information are useful. If you buy used right now, you're anchored to recent history. If you buy brand new, you're betting on the future. This creates a pretty obvious strategy. If you want to maximize your odds, buy a 2 to 4 year old example. Let the first owner absorb whatever initial depreciation happened. Then you own it for 3 or 4 years and sell it before the curve gets steep again. Here's the math on that. The coupe loses about 8% of its value in the first 3 years, 17% by year 5, and 28% by year 7 according to the data. If you buy it at year 3 and sell it at year 6, you're looking at roughly 14 to 15% of the original sticker price in depreciation during your ownership. That's often less than 1 year of depreciation on a brand new luxury sedan. Plus, when you buy certified pre-owned, you get a 2-year unlimited mile warranty with no deductible and roadside assistance included. That's real protection against expensive repair bills during the time you own it. And certified cars sell easily when you're ready to move on because buyers value that inspection process and remaining warranty coverage. Let me paint you a real-world scenario. You're 45 years old. Kids are getting older, maybe heading toward college. You've been driving sensible cars your whole adult life because that's what responsible people do. But you've always loved cars, and you're at a point in life where you've got some financial flexibility. You can afford to spend a little more if it makes sense. You start looking at what's out there. You could buy a 3-year-old performance car from Munich for maybe $50,000. Nice vehicle, good performance, prestigious badge. Or you could buy a 3-year-old 911 for $85,000. That's a $35,000 difference up front, which sounds like a lot. But let's walk through what happens over the next 3 years. That Munich car will probably be worth around $32,000 when you sell it 3 years later. That's $18,000 in depreciation. The 911 will probably be worth $72,000 to $75,000. That's $10,000 to $13,000 in depreciation. So the cheaper car actually costs you more in depreciation over those 3 years, even though you paid less for it up front. Now add in insurance. Maybe the 911 costs you $5,000 per year and the other car costs you $3,500. That's $1,500 more annually for the 911 or $4,500 over 3 years. Fuel is probably similar for both since they're both performance cars. Maintenance might be $2,000 per year for the 911 and $1,800 for the other one. So the 911 costs you maybe $600 more over 3 years in maintenance. When you add everything up, the total cost of owning that Munich car for 3 years is probably around $30,000 to $35,000. The total cost of owning the 911 is around $27,000 to $32,000. The 911 actually costs less to own despite costing $35,000 more to buy. And one of these cars is the Icon that's been the benchmark for sports cars for over 60 years. You get all of that, plus it costs less than the supposedly sensible alternative. This is why the whole conversation about smart car buying is backwards. Everyone's focused on the monthly payment or the sticker price. They assume luxury cars are automatically more expensive. They never actually calculate the complete picture. So they end up in a perfectly nice everyday car that's cheap to insure and cheap to maintain, but it's also boring to drive and it's depreciating more than they think because nobody's tracking that invisible cost. When you're shopping for one of these used sports cars, there are some smart moves you should make. First, target cars in popular colors: black, white, silver, gray. These hold value better than unusual colors because more buyers want them. Same thing with wheels and options. Don't buy somebody's ultra-customized car with weird paint and every carbon fiber piece known to humanity. Those custom options don't hold their value. The original owner might have spent 20 grand on custom paint, but you won't get that money back. Second, look at what similar cars are actually selling for before you buy. If 3-year-old examples are selling for only 10 to 15% less than 2-year-old examples, that tells you the depreciation curve is gentle and you're in good shape. Check dealer listings. Look at auction results. Browse enthusiast forums. Get a feel for the real market. Third, get a pre-purchase inspection even on certified cars and definitely on regular used cars. Spend the $300 to $500 to have a specialist look at the car. They'll find things you'd never notice. Buyers of these cars care deeply about service records and clean history. If you skip the inspection and buy a car with hidden issues, you'll pay for it later. Fourth, shop your insurance hard. That national average is just an average. Some people pay $3,000, some pay $8,000. Get quotes from multiple companies. Tell them exactly how you plan to use the car. If you work from home and drive 5,000 miles a year, that's very different from someone commuting 50 miles daily. Bundle with your homeowner's insurance. The spread between the cheapest and most... The financially sophisticated approach is to look at everything. What will this car be worth when I sell it? How much will insurance really cost me? How much will I actually spend on gas given how I drive? How much is realistic maintenance? Add it all up and compare it honestly. When you do that math, these two sports cars look shockingly good because they dominate on the biggest cost, which is depreciation. But you have to be honest about your situation. If you're going to daily drive at 20,000 miles per year through harsh winters, and you've got a bad driving record that makes insurance insane, this strategy doesn't work. The save money approach assumes you're treating the car appropriately. Garage kept, driven enthusiastically but not abused, reasonable miles, properly maintained. It also assumes you plan to sell the car at some point. If you're buying it to drive for 20 years until the wheels fall off, depreciation doesn't matter at all. But if you're like most people who turn over cars every 3 to 7 years, depreciation is enormous and you can't ignore it. There's one more thing that's hard to quantify, but it's real. The experience of owning one of these cars is different. There's a whole community around them. Track days, driving tours, club events. You can join clubs and get professional instruction on how to drive better. You can explore what the car can actually do in a safe, controlled environment. The cars are engaging to drive even at normal speeds. There's a connection and involvement that most modern cars just don't offer. This isn't for everyone. Some people genuinely don't care about driving and just want reliable transportation. For them, buy whatever costs the least and don't overthink it. But if you're someone who's always loved cars, who appreciates good engineering and driving dynamics, these vehicles give you all of that engagement without the financial penalty that usually comes with special cars. You're at a point in life where you've earned some rewards. You don't have to justify every purchase with spreadsheets and guilt. But if you can get the car you really want and have it actually make financial sense compared to the alternatives, why wouldn't you? That's what this is really about. Having your cake and eating it too. Getting to own something special while being financially smart about it. So here's the bottom line. Depreciation is the biggest cost of car ownership, and most people never think about it. These two sports cars depreciate less than almost anything else you can buy. That advantage is so large it can overcome higher costs everywhere else. Buy the right model at the right point in its depreciation curve. Maintain it properly and sell it well. Do that, and yes, you can actually save money while driving something that makes every trip feel like an event. If you found this eye-opening, hit that like button because this perspective completely changed how I think about car buying. And subscribe because I'm breaking down more financial myths that cost people a fortune. What car have you been told to avoid that might actually make financial sense? Drop it in the comments. Let's talk about it.